Good evening. I'm Jennifer Weeks, County Librarian for the Santa Clara County Library District and co-chair of Silicon Valley Reads. Tonight, we are so happy to have author Richard Louie here to talk about his work, including this year's featured title, Enough About Me, The Unexpected Power of Selflessness. First, we will share a short video about Silicon Valley Reads, and then Cindy Hill, president of the Los Altos Library Endowment, the organization sponsoring tonight's wonderful event, will lead the discussion. Thank you again for joining us.
For 19 seasons, Silicon Valley Reads has engaged the community in important conversations and free events centered around books and a common theme. Last year, our theme was Connecting, as the COVID-19 pandemic altered each of our lives, and we looked for ways to stay connected to each other and to our community. In 2022, as we continue to live with the impact of a global pandemic, we selected a theme to build on our connections: the power of kindness, resilience, and hope. Presented by the Santa Clara County Office of Education, the Santa Clara County Library District, and the San Jose Library, Silicon Valley Reads partners with 37 libraries, 32 school districts, local bookstores, and community organizations to encourage people to read the same thought-provoking books and participate in hundreds of free programs, including author talks, book groups, children's programs, and community events. For 2022, we have selected 3 memoirs, each of which embody the theme of the power of kindness, resilience, and hope from a unique perspective. See No Stranger by Valerie Kaur is part memoir, part practical guide to changing the world by loving each other, ourselves, and our opponents. Enough About Me by Richard Louie follows Richard on his journey to care for his father who suffers from Alzheimer's disease. Richard is struck by the impact compassion has, both as an individual and as a community. A Dream Called Home by Reina Grande is a beautifully written immigrant story of Reina crossing the border from Mexico at age 9. Her story enlightens us to the challenges so many confront in making a home in America. 4 books which align with the theme were selected for our children and youth to appeal to all ages from pre-K to high school. We have many exciting events planned for the whole community, both in person and virtually. Please visit www.siliconvalleyreads.org for more information and to register for more of our 2022 programs.
Hello, everyone, and again, welcome to Silicon Valley Reads with tonight's event, a conversation with author Richard Louie talking about selflessness and his book, Enough About Me, and his movie, Sky Blossom. I'm Cindy Hill, and I'm the president of the Los Altos Library Endowment, also known as LOLLY. The LOLLY board members are honored to host tonight's Silicon Valley Reads event and Richard Louie. LOLLY supports the library's services and collections by enhancing the scientific, medical, and technological materials for all ages, and we fund special items and projects such as the Whipple collection of great works and great topics available digitally and in person. Tonight, we're going to talk with Richard and then invite Alex Lowe from Richard's team to highlight some of the fun facts that are throughout the book. Then we'll talk about Richard's movie, Sky Blossom, and what's next in Richard's pipeline of ideas and projects. Richard is looking forward to your questions and will respond to them, so please type them in the Q&A section, which is found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Now, it's my delight to introduce Richard Louie. Veteran and award-winning journalist Richard Louie has more than 30 years in television, film, technology, and business. Currently, he is at MSNBC and was previously with CNN Worldwide. He is the first Asian American man to anchor a daily national cable news program. Richard has been the recipient of many awards, including a Team Emmy and a Peabody Award. Richard recently directed the feature documentary Sky Blossom, a film about student caregivers in military families. You can see it at the Three Below Theater in San Jose as part of Silicon Valley Reads. It's free and is next week, March 16th. Plus, Richard's going to be there for a conversation. Richard has lived, worked, and volunteered on every continent. And he's lived on both coasts, making North Carolina, making New York and Northern California his landing spots for many years. So Richard, welcome to Silicon Valley and Silicon Valley Reads.
Thank you, Cindy. It's
Hi,
great to be
Richard.
here. Yeah, it's good to be here.
So Richard, if you were to see my Enough About Me book, you would see a whole host of post-its as there were so many ideas, questions, gentle suggestions, graphs, drawings, and most touchingly, stories about people who exemplify selflessness, including ones about your family members and about you. Your book is a natural for Silicon Valley Reads theme this year, which is the power of kindness, resilience, and hope. And in your book, you mentioned that writing a book was one of your goals. So how did you decide to write on this specific topic and this very personal topic?
First off, Cindy, thank you for what you do and what Silicon Valley Reads does. My mama, who was a elementary school teacher for 30 years in the Bay Area, would have loved the fact that well, she still loves the fact, I don't know if she loves it, but she's surprised I actually could write so many words in a row. The person who used to edit all of my essays and who swore by the Dewey Decimal System, and redid the library in her elementary school when she retired, and she went back and did that. So thank you so much for SV Reads and focusing on reading and what it means to folks. Cindy, as you know, reading for me is what brought me back to education. After I graduated from high school, I did not go to college, but I had one professor at City College of San Francisco, go Rams, who said, you must read and read every day. And that's what got me back into school. So what you're doing at Silicon Valley Reads is so important. What you're doing at Lally as well, super important. And so I know I'm talking a lot without answering your question, but I wanted to say, how important what you do is. Your question was, why did I write on this topic, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what drove me was, so what happened, as life happens, was that my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so I live in New York, where I work, and I started to fly back to California to take care of my father, who has Alzheimer's. And I did not want to be apart from his journey, his experience of going through, basically, if memories were a stack of pancakes, I didn't want to be there when he only had 2 pancakes. I want to be there when he had 30 and 40 pancakes, all the way down to 2. And so going through that experience from 30 pancakes to 2 sort of inspired me to try to write about something that would show the value that I think is important when it comes to family and being part of our great society. That was one. The second reason, Cindy, was that as a journalist, I was reporting on a lot of hate over the last 10 years, either because of the way you looked or because of random acts of mass killings. And I became really good at it, very good at covering those stories. That, along with the hateful speech and language that was happening as I was covering politics. And all that said, I could either write a book, which most journalists write about, is what they report on, or I could write about something that was opposite of that. And I knew that if I wrote about what I report on every day, that would probably be the more talked about book. But I decided to write about something that I knew would be a smaller bite. And that smaller bite and that doing my little bit, as they say, to counter what I was reporting on, to slow that down. I knew it wasn't going to be as necessarily successful by sales, but I knew at least it was the right thing to do. Much inspired by, as I was describing, my mother's a teacher. Mm-hmm. She was talking to 35 8-year-olds every year. I mean, do you change the world 35 at a time every year? And she would say yes. She would say yes. Yeah.
So in listening to you, it just struck me that you are a reporter, and so that's objective. And you've done a 180-degree switch of writing about yourself and your family. And there is some reporting in the book, because you can see the story, you can see the journey that you're going on. But then there's a lot of introspection. How was that transition for you at going from a reporter to a person?
Yeah. We don't typically, as reporters and journalists, by the standard of the trade, mm-hmm. talk about ourselves. And I know the title of the book's Enough About Me, and then I have stories about me. But the reason why I have stories about me is to show how imperfect it's okay to be. Because I didn't want to have a book that's called Enough About Me, a book about selflessness, and start, shaking fingers at people when I knew I was, Cindy, as you know, because you read it, I was very imperfect. And I guess what I learned putting the journalism stuff together with what I was living through as a family caregiver and taking care of my father all these years was the richer part of the story was taking care of my dad mm-hmm. than it was, if I had to take a choice, then it was talking about journalism. They both helped each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I found that I was living a richer and more, richer meaning a lot more crying and a lot more laughing in ways I didn't do before. And certainly reporting on the great travesties of our time brought more humanity out in me. But I think what brought the most humanity out of me was living my quiet little life of taking care of my dad and my mom.
Yeah, it becomes a very closed circle of time, doesn't it? Things just sort of move away from you, and all of a sudden that's what you're focused on. So throughout the book, you tell stories about others and also about yourself. And one of the things that I observed in it was that it seemed like you were going through a journey on that too, where all of a sudden you realize that the stories about people are as important and possibly more important than the event. And so how do you find a place to respect what the people are going through and not bringing it to the TV where people go, oh, that's just sensationalism.
Yeah, boy, you really, you hit it right on the head there, Cindy. It is about the people and more about than the event itself. The people on one end who decide to take lives. It's about the people that decide to take lives. It's about the lives that were taken. It's about the lives that often in the mass shootings that I've covered over the last 10 years, like Newtown, Connecticut, that destroyed me and my fellow journalists at 30 Rock, mm-hmm. How can you take elementary school kids? How do you tell people about that? How do you be strong but weak at the same time? How do you, give you the story, Cindy, without being overly, structured about it?
Yeah.
Because that's not the job. Our job is not to be overly structured. Our job is to share with you that experience that is relevant to the context. And, I guess what I learned after all this tough stuff was that you don't have to always get all of your your subject verb agreements right. You don't always have to, get all of your pronunciations right. You don't always have to, pick the right words. The most important thing in the storytelling is really getting to the reality and the honesty. And the honesty and the reality is not subject verb agreement. And the honesty and reality is not stuttering, right? In fact, life has a lot of stutters in it. So the one thing about these stories, which are often so tough to tell and imperfectly told, is so long as you got your both feet on the ground, as they like to say, and you're trying and you're honestly giving, you will. And I'm getting a little meta on this, but then you're getting the story across in the right way. And so to answer your question, I would say the story is bigger than the story. It is about the people. And often I want to tell you about the amazing people on the sidelines that I meet the first time I get on air. 23 people were killed. I don't want to talk about the person that did that. Mm-hmm. And part of me doesn't want to talk about the death. I do want to talk about the 23 amazing lives. And I do want to talk about the 50 people that worked to save them. I want to talk about the 3 people that tried to stop the assailant. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about the first responders that were so distraught because they couldn't get there fast enough. That's what I want to talk about. But, that's not the structure of the way we tell stories.
So that sort of leads into another question that came to me today, which is gratitude. So when I was going through my book and looking at all my post-its, that part really jumped out at me. So you write about gratitude. You say, we recognize the beauty of what we have instead of being jealous of what others have. And that's one line that I'm going to keep for myself. I really like it.
And me too.
And so how does gratitude and selflessness work together?
Yeah, they are the best cousins ever. And when you think about gratitude, it is certainly an expression of selflessness. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, SV Reads. Thank you for understanding what I've been going through. Thank you for, giving your time and your effort. The selfless notion of gratitude is that I'm being vulnerable by saying, I needed what you just gave me. Mm-hmm. I accept what you just gave me. And when I was working with the team, there's a team of 10 of us, because I never believe I could write anything alone necessarily, but I'm not saying that I didn't write what you read. I did write what you read. I'm just saying I worked with the team because with everything I've done, I always work with a team, and you're about to meet one of the team members, Alex. But gratitude is so important because it's not only the good cousin of selflessness for the reasons I described, it also is a way that encourages others to be selfless. So as you know, what I write about in the book is, if I were to write a gratitude letter to you, Cindy, or to my mentor, which is a selfless expression of, I needed what you gave me, and I'm showing you that. But the dopamine, the cortisol levels that drop, the stress hormones, that lasts for a month after I write you a gratitude letter. Mm-hmm. Gratitude is so helpful, saying in a real way, thank you. And I appreciate what you've done. There are some great gratitude apps out there. You can build up your gratitude muscle set. I used one when I first started writing the book, and I was using it every day. And it was very interesting because all you do is the app says, give me your list of what you're grateful for. And you sit there and you just type in what you're grateful for. And after 3 or 4 months, I realized it depended every day what I was grateful for. Someday I would say, Thank you, Rob, my brother, for being so selfless and caring for my father and my mother. Kristen, thank you for giving all of your time for traveling from LA. Mark, thank you for leaving work and your family to take care of, mom and dad. Other days it was like, isn't it kind of amazing? I'm so grateful for the fact that I actually have running water and a washing machine.
Right. Right.
Gratitude apps are a good way of building muscle tone that is in parallel with a selfless muscle tone.
So, since you brought up one of your brothers, we did get a question about that, and it says, as you are not the primary, I think it's a she, is assuming that you were not the primary caregiver, and I'm wondering how your brother, who must have been the primary caregiver, felt about his service and how you felt about his service.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. The idea of a primary caregiver versus a secondary caregiver. And my mom was a primary caregiver. But as soon as any of the 4 children got on the ground, we were the primary caregivers for that amount of time. And then it went back to my mom. And I think all of us at the moment when we were the primary caregivers, we were glad that we could do it. Number one. Number two, we never felt alone, but we knew how much work then my mother was going through. So she was the primary caregiver. I'd fly into town, be there for 3 days. I was the primary caregiver. Then I'd leave. And then my mom would be the primary caregiver. And then sibling number 1 and number 2 and number 3 would show up. I think the idea of what did the primary caregiver feel about her service, in this case, my mother, she never complained, but she gave too much. She gave too much of her health, her physical health. She gave too much of her mental health. And she never said anything about it. And that's a super important question that was asked. Yeah, the sole primary caregiver gives often too much. And in the book, that's why we have a checklist of when you are giving too much. Yeah, you can be too selfless. You will sleep less, become more angry, blurt out more, forget the things you're supposed to do. And so the primary caregiver does give often way too much. And in the book, and you know this, I call it the scream. Because we had cloud cameras in the apartment so we could help my mom monitor my father, who was wandering around the house. And I saw my mother scream one time, and we weren't, lording over her. When something happened, we would just, go to the cameras. And I realized her scream was not about anger about my father not knowing what he was doing. It wasn't only that. It was anger. It was frustration. It was also a cry for help. It was also a cry. And when I heard it, Cindy, I knew that was a moment that my mother, the primary caregiver, was giving too much.
Yeah, a lot of this hits home because my 3 siblings and I took care of our mom, and my brother was the primary caregiver. So your stories are just spot on. So I appreciate you sharing this with us and with me.
And you too, Cindy.
Thank you. So in your section, so I am a librarian. I do not work at a public library. I happen to work in a corporate environment, but I am a librarian. And so the section, one chapter, one word at a time, really connected with me because I'm a librarian and I'm a reader. And so you write about reading, that we are what we read. And with your mother as a teacher and a librarian, and I call her a librarian because she took care of those books. So I just love that little story. So what influences did words have in your life after you realized that reading was important?
Hmm.
Because the reason why I ask that is that because you talk about in your storytelling, the model of see, say, and say, see.
Yeah.
And you talk about, I can't remember, you don't call them power words, but you call them a different kind of word. And that really hit home with me.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why, Cindy, the words I'm talking about are the words that, so the reason when we're in that chapter, the one thing that comes to mind immediately in all the books that you've read and that you've cataloged is that the words that we've used in history, as you know, we looked at and quoted one of the scientists on my team had cataloged all the books in the last 200 years. And the selfish words increased in usage, and the selfless words decreased in usage. And if books were the most cultivated space of our language, most curated space of our language, boy, that doesn't bode well. And the I words, which you are also alluding to, the me words that we often use, are way too frequent in our vernacular. I believe, I think.
Mm.
Well, I do care what you think, Cindy. But more importantly, today was a tough day. I think today was a tough day. I think that it was wrong that it was done. It was wrong that it was done. And the fact that so many of the words that we use starts with I think and I believe now, the structures of our sentences, says a lot that I check myself all the time. Why do I care why I believe? There's sometimes it's important, but in general, let's focus on the fact. And that's definitely a journalistic view, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is 14 degrees outside. I don't believe it's 14 degrees outside. Why do I need to say I believe or I think?
Mm.
And so, I mean, the words that we choose are super important when we think about being selfless. One word that is often used, which is, I think, sometimes a selfish word, especially for us men, is we use the word guys. Why do I think the whole world's a bunch of guys? Like you, Cindy. Let's say it's Cindy and Jennifer, and I say, "Hey, you guys, how's it going? Good to see you, guys. Good to see you." Well, I'm sorry. Are my glasses not working? I mean, it's not two guys, right? It's a fairly selfish belief that all of me are all of you, and therefore I can. So the chapter is so important to me because, being a journalist is I focus on words all the time. And if we can just start by correcting ourselves, like I brought up the example of guys.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we say guys, stop and think, oh, wait, is it all guys? I'm a guy. So is that right? And we start to change the way we think. The little muscles in our brain, the synapses, start to evolve.
Yeah. So to switch topics a little bit, because we got a really interesting question from the audience, which is, what advice would you give to anxious parents whose high school kids have potential but aren't doing well in school? Is there anything that they can say or do to help the kid?
Ooh. I was one of those kids. And I almost flunked out of high school twice. For you Bay Areans, I went to Lowell High School and got kicked out and almost flunked. And then the second high school, same thing almost happened. And I don't have the magic answer, only to say that, I was a tough kid. And what brought me back around at the end of the day was knowing that my parents cared about me. And they also understood that they had to let me find my time and my space. I wish I could have that answer of, those who are, living through that difficult time with your kids in high school. That is just, especially in the Bay Area. I mean, the one thing that I tell and my brother's not listening, nor my friends, but when they're deciding where should my kids go to high school, and I have to go to the best high school, and it's like, no, it's not, because I didn't go to the best high school. At the end of the day, I went to the school that would challenge me and give me the best environment of not being overly comfortable or uncomfortable. And so those who have potential at school, yeah, I wish I could say I have an answer, only that I've always been the uncle that will quiz you, but then hug you.
Nice. So we're going to do something a little different as part of our talk. And we've invited Alex Lowe to join us and share some of his insights.
That's the end. Oh, the whole show's gone downhill now. You brought in Alex? Gee whiz.
So let me tell the audience a little bit about Alex now that you've kind of broken the ice on that one. So Alex is the Asian American Journalists Association named Alex as one of the top 40 young journalists in America. And he is the producer of Sky Blossom, the movie that I mentioned that is going to be shown next week, which is the most widely distributed documentary of 2021. He's traveled around the world for his work in production for NBC News National, the NBA, and the NHL. I love hockey. Yay, go Sharks. Or my husband would say, go Red Wings. But Richard, is there anything you'd like to add about Alex before we hear from him about his insights into the book?
I mean, other than the fact that, you've already decreased the value of our conversation. I'm joking. I mean, Alex is, there's a program at the Asian American Journalists Association, Cindy. And it's called J Camp. If you're in high school, you come, you spend time with us, we teach you about journalism. And Alex was one of my students about 10 years ago. And we would gather every night, all of us teachers, and we would talk about, so who's doing well and who's not. And I would say, and we go through our kids, and I'll go, well, yeah, that Alex, he's not going to be a journalist, this guy. I mean, nice kid, but never going to make it. And then he goes to BU, gets a full scholarship, applies to AJ's NBC News scholarship for the summer. He gets it the first time. He gets it the second time. And, he doesn't come from, comfortable background. He's worked really, really hard. And so I was surprised at how he had turned from wanting to be in STEM to moving to become a storyteller. And here I was, and boy, this is a judgment, not about Alex, but about my judgment, is that how wrong I was 10 years ago, because he's turned out to be an amazing producer and committed to the right stories that need to be told. And he's only 18 years old. So that's what I will say, Cindy. Over to you.
That's very kind, both of you. Thanks so much, Cindy, for having us. Thanks, Richard, for that kind introduction. Like Richard said, we go back a while, but I got to say my time with the Silicon Valley libraries goes back even longer, because we would go when I was very young to the Santa Clara Library. So a big shout out to them. And I have it on good authority from the librarians there that I think as kids, my brother and I think we're on the top 10 list of, number of books checked out from there. So, so I give a lot of credit to them for inspiring me as a reader and for success later in life.
So tell us some of the insights that you have about the book, how it was coming together, the mix, the wonderful blend of all different ways to approach this topic of selflessness.
Yeah, Cindy, I was brought on the team along with a lot of other folks who had many different backgrounds. So I came in to do some of the research into some of the studies that you see in the book. But there were a lot of other folks who Richard brought into the team too, in a very collaborative way. Everyone from comedians to poets, researchers to even the cartoonists that you see who did the little illustrations, to really add a lot of more value to the book. So I came in to do the research part, really to try and answer the question, for those who are skeptical about selflessness, who need some numbers to prove it out. What are those numbers? What might they be? So, how can we show in a very scientific way using the studies that are out there, how does it make us happier? How does it make us healthier? How does it make us live longer lives, live more fulfilled lives? And we were able to find it time and time again, that there is really some evidence behind it. And then in addition to that, I worked with Dr. Palin Kesavir of the University of Wisconsin, and we put together some studies of our own to use Richard as our guinea pig, so to speak, to try and prove out some of these concepts. So, for example, the one study we always love to talk about is where we had Richard create sort of a dating profile almost, where he put that he in one of the profiles he put that he had volunteered, in the other he did not, and we asked people to say which of these profiles is more attractive, and we found that the profile where Richard said he was volunteering, even though it was the same photo, the same everything else was the same, people were rating him higher. And I think he scored pretty well too, just in terms of the attractiveness. I'm glad it wasn't me who was being rated. So kudos to Richard for being the guinea pig there. So we really tried to bring it out and prove out what for a skeptical person, what is it that might make you buy into this?
So, excuse me. I do need to take a little sip of water. So it sounds like you and Richard and the team did a lot of collaboration and wove things together. How did that work? How did that come together?
Yeah, Richard is a great collaborator, in all of the projects that we've done, whether it's been the film or the book, because there are really some a lot of different talented folks who he has been able to bring onto the team. It's been a little interesting with this here now being in the pandemic world, where we're constantly on Zoom meetings with some of these professionals to try and work things out. So it's really just a lot of touch points with the team, and Richard has the big grand plan in his mind for what he'd like to get accomplished. In the book here, it was, how am I going to prove out selflessness in different ways? How am I going to show it, whether it's visually or through the research, even through the poetry that he brought poets on to do. So I think everything was very much towards that goal, but just he, as almost like a director on the film, is able to unlock different people's talents towards that vision.
Yep. I really enjoyed the blend of the scientific and the fact base, and then with the personal stories about other people and also about Richard. So it was quite successful for me. So I'd like to switch over to the movie Sky Blossom. And I didn't know anything about it until I started to look it up. And I come from a military background. My father was in the service in the Army. And so as soon as I saw that, it's like, I have got to watch this documentary. It's very, very important. And actually, I'd like to have Richard come back on screen too. So my number one question is please tell the audience why it's named Sky Blossom. I think it's a beautiful story.
Yeah, Cindy. Sky Blossom, and we struggled. We went through, a lot of little surveys and, It was our first movie. As Alex often says, we had 150 volunteers for the movie. And because it's about young caregivers, age 11 to 26, 5 of them across the country, and they happen to be in military families. It's a window into caregiving because most people think about family caregiving and they think about people like me, sandwich generation. And instead we're like, well, let's turn it on its ear. You have a 11-year-old family caregiver. You have a 15 and a 14-year-old caregiver. And I think the reason why we decided on Sky Blossom in the end, because it was always kind of like, well, we like it, but maybe it's not the right one. During World War II, there was the first use widely of paratroopers. And if you were on the front line and worked for and were a soldier for the Allies, you would need help sometimes. You would need a paramedic. You need more reinforcements. And they would call on the 82nd Airborne, for instance. And you were just hoping for them to get there.
Yeah.
Every moment, like, when are they going to get here? You'd look up and here come the propeller planes. And what the soldiers on the ground would do when they would look up and they would say, oh, here come those paratroopers. And they'd be jumping out of the planes to help them, either to sew up their wounds or reinforce and give them the backup. And you would see their parachutes open. And they were like blossoms.
Yeah.
And so the saying during World War II is, here come sky blossoms.
Wow.
So we're like, this is exactly what these young family caregivers are. They're sky blossoms.
Yeah.
They're dropping in behind lines to help you, and well, in their case, to help their mom or their dad or their grandfather or grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why the name of the film was I Blossom, Diaries of the Next Greatest Generation. Because when we first started using this term, was during the time of the greatest generation.
Mm.
And we really do believe, and I don't think Alex would ever argue against this, is that after doing this for 5 or 6 years of filming them and editing them, that you really do believe that based on the values and what we saw them do on film every day, that Darren at the age of 14, Rihanna at the age of 10 and 11, and everybody else were truly the next greatest generation because of the courage and the I just got to do this kind of approach they had. They are sky blossoms. They are the next greatest generation.
So I just want to remind the audience that they can send in their questions because we're going to be moving into that pretty soon. But so is there a special story that you'd like to share, a behind the scenes story that, or more that came out of during the filming and the editing of this movie, this documentary? Alex has a story.
That's a tough question. We worked on that film for 5 years, Cindy, to make that, to go out into the field with each of the families. So they come from every different part of the country, and we and the team, we're going out to each and every one of them to for several visits to see how things changed over time. We start, and it's crazy. Some of those kids, I remember filming them 5 years ago, and it's like, you're 15 now. And, and they've grown so much, but have always retained that spirit that Richard talked about of doing, of caring for their loved ones, because it is the right thing to do. And it's been amazing to see that. But as far as a behind the scenes story, I don't know, Richard, anything that comes to your mind? I think I need to think about this one.
I think what was the most surprising, and Alex, you've heard me say this before, was I could be their dad, and I came from another city, totally different profession. And I'm landing and I'm talking to them in Waimea, Kauai, McMinnville, Tennessee. You pick the town, right? And the first time we sit down and we're talking to each other, we've got all these cameras. We got a crew of 5 people. We got lights. We've got, 800 pounds of equipment. And we say, sit there and act like you're natural. Just and look into this, because you can't see me when I'm interviewing you. You're actually looking at a screen.
Oh.
Because they're looking straight into the camera. And it's like, just be natural. And the thing is, they were more than natural, is that they were so giving. Darren, who's from McMinnville, Tennessee, is one of our earlier interviews. I remember so vividly because I saw her and she knew I saw her and she saw me too. And that's why she allowed, in the movie, you'll see how open she is. And she cries a couple times, and I was not there to do that, right? That's not my goal. My goal was to get their story. And the first time I sat down with her, like day one, she is saying, here it is, right? She says, my dad is my hero. And she begins to cry because she also knows that her hero needs to be protected. And she's the one to protect him. And she begins, as Cindy, did you see the movie?
Not yet.
All right. So a little bit of a teeny spoiler. And when she gave that to us and to me, here you go, I knew what I told her in the beginning. I said, whatever you tell me, I will be there now. I'll be there when I'm in edit. I will be there when we are broadcasting, and I will be there after, and I will guard your story. And I'm not going to parachute away, because we're often accused as journalists that we parachute in and then we leave and then whoop, we forget. But what I told her, and I really believe that after because she said, okay, I trust you, here you go, is that I will guard your story. Our team will guard your story. And I think that was the most surprising thing, Cindy, is that in our own difficulty and our pain, we do trust other people in ways that we shouldn't throw away. And I never did that with Darren. Never. Because she gave something at the age of 15 to say, this is my pain, this is my difficulty. And I was just so honored that she would tell us that and trust that when we went to edit it. And she never has seen the movie, by the way, because she doesn't like to be on TV and film. Her mother's seen it many times. And her mom actually said, Jessica is her name. Jessica said, wow, my kids are kind of cool. Remember that, Alex?
Yeah.
And we're like, you know what? We knew that from the moment we sat down and interviewed them and we edited them. But when she saw the film and saw them, she was like, I guess I did okay.
Yeah.
I guess I did just all right.
I wonder if she was seeing her children through your lens, that you gave her a different perspective for her to recognize her children's awesomeness.
And we've heard that from a lot of the families and from some of the kids too, where they've heard it from some of their friends who may have watched the film, who have said, wow, what you're doing for your parent or your grandparent is incredible. And I do it for my parents too, or my grandparents.
Yeah.
So there's been this really beautiful, coming out in a sense of saying, hey, I go through this caregiving experience myself. For a lot of caregivers, I know myself included, as I did it for my grandparents, we don't necessarily use that label. We don't know that's what we do, but we do it. And for a lot of folks who come away watching the movie, they come to us and say, hey, I can use that word. I am a caregiver. This is what I'm doing. and I'm proud to have done it.
So a really basic question, is Sky Blossom an outcome of the book? Is that how it led in? Well, I guess it couldn't, because you were doing the documentary before Richard started writing the book, correct?
Yeah,
That's right.
You're asking the right question though.
Okay.
It's actually the other way around.
Yeah. I just realized the chronology.
Yeah, but in many ways they're the same inception point, in that inspired by Richard's caregiving story.
So is there a role that social media plays in this type of topic? So we've got the book, which is about words in print or as an audiobook or as an ebook. And then we have the documentary, which is very visual. And so many people are on different wavelengths of social media. Is there an angle there or an approach there that would be useful?
We actually spent a lot of time considering how to develop that part of the Trinity, if you will. And Alex and I have been working with several digital social storytelling platforms. And we were figuring out, okay, how do we port that over? It's still in development, but yeah, for this particular project, that was one leg we did not, develop to its fullest outcome.
Yeah.
But all the other legs, Cindy, which was brought up earlier, we did work on. So, the distribution into theaters for the film, the idea that you could get it on a DVD, that there was a soundtrack, the idea that, you could interface with it in different ways was super important for us. We also wanted to validate to folks, all 50, I would say 60 million of all of you who are family caregivers with no pay and no training. We work to validate that you exist and you have that full-time job. And we wanted to make sure that was put in the places that would validate it. That's in movie theaters in 50 states. That's at the Kennedy Center. That's with Grammy and Oscars qualification. These are all the things we were working hard to make sure that something that's so important to our culture and for really our future, caring for other people, that we needed to put it in the most important places.
Thank you. So another question we were asked, is there a gratitude app that do you just go onto Google or any search engine and type in gratitude app? How do you find it?
Alex?
Yeah, you can just go right on to the App Store. There are dozens of them out there in the Google Play Store if you're on the Android. And I know, Richard, you tried using one of them, and you also tried a journal and letter, and you write about that in the chapter too. Right. All different ways. I think you could try different ones and see what works out best. I know in my personal experience, I really like the writing it down in the journal. There's something to me about writing it physically down. And I know, Richard, you got a lot out of doing the letter, writing a gratitude letter to your father.
The apps are really great because you could be at the bus station, you could be in the bathroom, you could be waiting for water to boil. You got that egg timer for 60 seconds, whatever. You got time to boom, 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 boom. By the way, I don't know who uses an egg timer. I sound like I'm from the 1940s, but.
Thank you. So I need to know, what is in the works now? What's next in your journey? And are you taking Alex with you?
Yes, Alex and the entire team have got big hearts, and Alex has given a lot to these projects. The next one is focused on mental health.
Oh.
And it's coming out later in 2022. It's 6 years in the making.
Mm.
And it does share a bit of my own conversation about mental health in the time that I've had.
So is that a book or a documentary?
It's a movie. It's another movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Another documentary, I should be more specific.
Yeah.
We've been editing it for about 15 months. The website has been in development for probably 3 months, which will come out maybe over the next month. And all of these are not-for-profit efforts that have, we've raised money from great, kind organizations and that have given to it. So, yeah. And thank you to all the volunteers who've been working for, peanuts.
And one of our viewers wants to know, is Sky Blossom available to check out from the libraries, or do they need to go to a theater?
So this is a good opportunity to plug the Silicon Valley Reads events, because next week is when we'll have the screening at the Three Below Theater in San Jose from Silicon Valley Reads. I know, Cindy, you and the team have some information on how folks can register for that next week, so I won't steal too much of your thunder there. But it's also, if you're not able to make that screening, it's out there to get on DVD from in digital as well, and it's also streaming on Peacock. And but if you don't have access to any of those, it'll be on PBS in May across the country. So it is really out there in a lot of different places. So
thank you.
So I hope folks are able to come to the event next week, because I know Richard will be there to talk after the film and answer any questions after the viewing. Yeah,
come to Three Below with SV Reads.
Yeah. You'll see me there. So another question we have is that there's been a lot of talk from politicians and our president about giving financial support to caregivers. And have you seen any movement in that direction, in a positive direction, to help ease the scream of caregiving?
I really do believe, over the last, 7 years now, I've been trying to make it the way I put one foot in front of the other. And, being a caregiving champion for the Alzheimer's Association and AARP was a very interesting thing to do, Cindy. I never thought I'd have the title, caregiving champion. But I really wanted to bring to the fore all the amazing people that I've met, and this too. Every time you meet a family caregiver and they say, "Oh, I took care of you fill in the blank," it's almost like an immediate hug.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, yeah, we know each other, don't we? And so that's why it is so important that we talk about this, and why we do this, and we share that commonality of caregiving.
Yeah, and Cindy, one of the things we're really proud of with Sky Blossom, when you talk about some of the political movement and groundswell that's been happening recently, is with Sky Blossom, actually the leaders from both parties fully knowing that the other was doing this. So both Speaker Pelosi and Leader McConnell signed on to be supporters of Sky Blossom and say, these young caregivers are the kind of people who we need to be supporting.
And when do those two actually do that?
I can't think of a whole lot of times. And Richard and I both cover politics.
We both cover politics. That's right.
Yeah, and so that's a real once in a blue moon kind of moment, and exciting to see that we can have some agreement on that, because to us it's really something that is so important.
Yeah, and to build on that, Cindy, we really are living through, if we can say this, it's a little bit bold, but we are kind of living through a bit of a renaissance around understanding what family caregivers are in a institutional way. There are some states who have now recognized them. The allusion to your question about the current president, who has pushed for recognition of family caregivers and assistance to them, is another head nod to that. Like, we don't, push for anything one way or another. every government needs to decide what's good for them about caregiving. We just know we need more help for family caregivers. We don't know what the solution is. We're not prescribing what needs to happen. But to answer your question very directly, yeah, it is really great to see the percolation and the discussion about family caregiving and that it's important, right? That's the important. We're going in the right way. Before it wasn't important. So, yeah, if somebody became unwell, well, if you put them into a care home, that was the better solution. I'm not saying that's always not a good solution, because sometimes it is. My father, we had to move into a care home because of how advanced Alzheimer's had moved into his body. But, I'm just saying there's more than one way now to address it. Yeah. And we're open to doing that. And that's really great.
Yeah, you've started a conversation. You've made people aware, and they can act on whatever they want to act on. So that's the powerful part of it. So it's time for us to wrap up, unfortunately. But I do want to remind people that Sky Blossom is going to be next week, March 16th. And Bryant has put the link in for registration in the chat. So just click on that and you can register. And as a wrap up, I do want to acknowledge and thank our two county librarians, Bryant Boag and Richard Lopez. They are the people behind the scenes that have kept the system going. And they, excellent. They are our technical gurus. So thank you. And I also want to thank our Zoom participants and audience. I appreciate the questions that you've been asking, and I appreciate your attention. Thank you for being a part of Silicon Valley Reads this 2022. And your questions have been invigorating. Be sure to check out Richard's book at the library and at your neighborhood bookstore. Richard and Alex, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you.
Like the way to interact. I appreciate your thoughtfulness, and it was his own story, and I look forward to seeing you at the theater next week. And everyone have a very pleasant good night, and bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.